There we go.
Working now.
Yep. Yeah.
How peculiar.
Yeah, very strange. Very strange. It was just that one setting, I guess. They didn't like the, because I got it to import all my settings from my OBS because I have OBS set up how I like it usually. But oh well. So I don't know if we have a topic for today. I know you've done a few videos, and you, like I say, you said you were streaming yesterday. Like I didn't get a chance to watch it because I was also streaming at the same time. So
it's funny how it works, isn't it? I try to. I mean, what you follow so many people on on online and stuff, and inevitably everyone sort of has the same sorts of time that they like to stream and stuff. So I mean, I try and hop between them sometimes, but
right.
The joys of the modern internet, so you can watch things on replay, right? You can
yes,
get up and catch up and stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
But yes, I did stream yesterday and a few days ago, and both topics had both streams had a fairly similar theme of immigration and ICE and general sort of far right wing attitude towards immigration at the moment, which would be quite an interesting one to chat about, because I imagine, I mean, we focus a lot on America at the moment, and rightfully so, right? Because their situation's really bad. But I don't know how about, I can imagine in Canada it's fairly similar, but in the UK we've got our own sort of imitation far. Well, I wouldn't say imitation. They're obviously just as far right and stuff, but like they've seen the MAGA stuff in America, and they think, oh, this has been quite successful. Let's do the same thing over here.
It seems to be fine. We'll just do that.
So we actually at the moment there's been a bit like last summer some protests about immigration and the essentially just far right hate rallies, basically just all the worst people you can imagine have instigated a protest for women's safety or for some other nebulous term, and essentially use it to I think sort of what you have all these like towns in the country which are still there's a lot of people there, but it's not like a big built up city,
right?
So they aren't as diverse. There's not the same sort of diverse makeup of it. So like if you try to do something like in like London or Manchester, it's like there's going to be no support for it, or there's going to be maybe a few dozen people protesting, but like thousands of counter protesters. If you do it in some small town and you've got you hire a bus, take a load of people there for the day, there's obviously people there already who are more susceptible to the sorts of far right propaganda that gets made up and stuff. You can suddenly amass a few few hundred people to kick up quite a scene. And so we've got at the moment several towns in the UK that are seeing these protests where people come out from their houses and stuff potentially, but there's also like agitators and provocateurs and people with an obvious like career in like far right social media figures,
right?
And it's on the one hand it's very superficial because these people are blatantly just wanting to make a quick bit of social media furore, right? You go there,
right? You
give everyone your social media, say I speak the truth. I've got this account on Twitter or whatever, and I talk about how the immigrants are going too far or whatever, and suddenly you're into the same media networks as all of them. But it's also quite scary because at the end of the day, this is still a far right rally. Basically, this is still a load of people using the same symbols as like all the horrible groups we've seen over the years, going right back to like the National Front and stuff, and the history of far right activity in the UK.
Right. Yeah. And like fascists can get violent, right?
Yeah. No. Exactly. And they did. I mean, last summer, so they target hotels that are housing asylum seekers and refugees and protests, but inevitably those protests turn quite nasty because like last year they set fire to bins right outside the building. They tried to make the like fire alarms and stuff go off in the hotels, so people inside would have to come outside and obviously face a quite violent mob.
Jeez, yeah.
Loads of really horrible stuff, threats to people's safety and stuff. And like the really galling thing is at the same time as this, obviously the police are there and there have been like clashes and stuff, but it's, you contrast it to the current protests about Palestine, where like we're seeing hundreds of people just being like arrested and quite violently too, and like the images of like 80-year-old plus people who've gone there with like placards and stuff, but are clearly not a threat to, like, they're not a physical danger to anyone,
Right.
being like lifted and manhandled out of the way by a massive police presence. And it's really galling to see that once again the focus of policing and seemingly the government as well is on the sort of widespread condemnation of the awful genocide and such in Palestine versus for the far right are loud and they've got numbers and stuff, but they're not exactly like a majority. Like more people have criticisms of what's going on in the Middle East right now versus nonsense made up stories about immigrants that could quite quickly proved false as well. A lot of them.
I guess on some level I knew that like the UK had like a bunch of anti-immigrant stuff. We me and Pam, we watched like a YouTube video maybe, or a documentary about the immigration system, and it like followed like 3 or 4 people who were immigrants, and the way that they were like, I don't know, it's an awful system. It's like Canada, where it's like the default is to treat them inhumanely and kick them out of the country as fast as possible. And then you get these far right groups who are like pretending that immigration is out of control. And it's just like that distortion between reality and perception, right?
Yeah. Like immigrants have to go through so many hoops to get to the. I mean, obtaining a visa is hard enough by itself, but all the nonsense citizenship tests and all the loops you have to go through to actually find employment and find a place to live, the prejudice from the fact that employers have to be careful even hiring them because even before this, but like the idea that if you dare hire someone who's not got a visa, then we'll fine your business thousands of pounds and we'll come and detain the person. Right. As though, like, they've done something really awful. Like, you've hired someone without a visa. Oh no! Like, but I think it speaks to the whole like debate around it is so badly framed because, like, let's say you met someone who had entered the country illegally, like that in of itself isn't. Like,
right.
What is
they're just a person, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so inevitably they have to tack on all these. Like, I mean, the big thing at the moment is, like you've got to be like some assault or something that happens, and they will clamour to find out where the person who assaulted someone else is from.
Right.
And if it's from one of the countries they are prejudiced towards, or from a nationality that typically has people who are of darker complexion, then that's open grounds then to mass demonstrate and beat up and fight anyone you think is foreign and all the other horrible stuff that's been going on.
Yeah, that's right. It's just a scapegoating of people, right? Like it's just like you say, like they find this. They ignore the hundreds of assaults or what have you that exist that are done by citizens, quote unquote citizens, and then they'll hop on like the one that's like an immigrant. They'll be like, "Oh, see, all immigrants are bad. That one guy was
exactly." And it's not even. I mean, the amount of misinformation in those circles too. Like the number of times it'll just be like the police will tweet out, "We've had we arrested someone in whatever town today," and you'll have. I mean, they've turned off comments, a lot of them now, but
of course,
underneath you'd see like dozens of people saying, "Why aren't you telling us where they're from? Why aren't you giving us more information? It's a cover up," and etc.
Right.
A lot of the time they'll receive false information. Someone's just tweeted out, say. Afghani international arrested, and then that blows up, and before someone's got a chance to fact check it and make sure it's all fine, it's already been seen by like 100,000 people who all now believe that it's another police cover up. And I think what's even worse is that even if someone from Afghanistan did do something, like so what? That doesn't
Right.
prove, like, there's no nationality is not like an inherent factor in why someone assaults someone. Like, there's no connection.
Yeah.
You can have a million people from a country doing something. That wouldn't prove that, oh, you were born here, therefore you now are at a bigger risk than someone else. Like, it's nonsense.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is just bigotry, right? Like, it's just like Muslims bad, or, you know, people from that area are all bad, and that means we can just mistreat them however we want, right? And
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like, the idea that the people showing up, like, because there's people who go to these events in part as well because it's like a big thing. Like, if you see a crowd, you might want to follow the crowd to see what's going on. A lot of it is, you know, you've got the sort of 20 agitators who have intentionally gone there with their far right stuff to be hateful and stuff. But they also know that if you wrap yourself in sort of English national colours, if you're making a big scene in a place that's maybe not got much happening, I mean, not to insult some of the places that these riots are happening in and these protests are happening in, but it's not like you're doing it in the middle of London where there's like a million things happening. It's in places that are smaller than cities and even small towns and stuff, because the high street is going to be like the center of where everything is, so everyone naturally sort of gravitates towards there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you've got a mass sort of gathering with, you know, a far right presence and stuff
Centering on that. Yeah,
exactly, right. And they've got numbers too, because, like, as well, you know, if you're draped in sort of English national colours and stuff, you've got the national link where we're English and we're doing this because we're proud of our country, whatever. Like, it's easy to mask stuff that's horrible within national symbols and national identity, because you've already sort of made half the step towards winning over people that are influenced by that sort of stuff. And then when you overlap that with the natural sort of misinformation that exists in right-wing circles, and the leaning on flashy headlines over doing, you know, sort of a more thorough research, and the look at people's identity as like the whole argument instead of like an actual, like analyzing patriarchal norms and sexism and misogyny and stuff would be a better way to understanding why violent crime is happening towards like young girls and teenagers and stuff. But instead it's all, well, where's this person from? Are they a Muslim? Are they whatever? Which is a footstep into far right thinking.
Yep. Yeah, it's like So when you were streaming, was your guest like somebody who agreed with you, or was it somebody that you disagreed?
So both guests were ones I disagreed with, right-wing ones. But interestingly, they were of different sorts of like leanings. So one of them was like a Trump-supporting type. I mean, interesting, we didn't actually discuss Britain's immigration stuff that much. Both were sort of more focused on American fascism and far right stuff. So one, first one got a little bit heated because, I mean, the guy wouldn't stop interrupting and just kept mouthing off.
Oh, geez.
And at one point, they were looking at, so obviously the chat is alongside the video.
Right.
And he said some slurs at one point, and the chat were like, obviously, criticizing him for it.
Yeah.
And he was sort of doing, a weird sort of right-wing thing where you pretend that everyone else is triggered and annoyed, and they're like acting as though they're some, like the Joker, almost like some Batman villain, where it's like, I can't believe you all reacted to that. You got so offended, and you kept doing this, and he kept looking back at the chat, and it was really tedious actually, because you're trying to. I mean, obviously, you already have to have quite a bit of patience to discuss some of this stuff with someone that is openly like. I mean, because I was asking him, like, would you be fine if ICE were treating you how they treated people they suspected of being illegals? And he just wouldn't answer. He was just saying, well, it's the law and blah blah. And you think, well, put that to the side for a second. Is this something you'd be fine happening to yourself?
Well, and
there's just no.
It's not actually the law. It's because there's literally citizens being nabbed up, right?
Exactly, right. It's one of the insidious things about right-wing logic is that it's wrong in so many ways that you start making one argument against it and you think, well, hang on a second, actually, well, there's so much of it is also it seems wrong. And I say to him, like, even if we accept all your caveats, oh, they're illegal, oh, they've done this and that, would you be fine with someone saying you've done something wrong and then just coming and shoving you in a windows van and taking you off to prison without even any
Right.
notification or chance even to contact a lawyer or anything. Like just grabbed off the street.
Yeah.
And there's no. He's like eventually right at the end. He was like, yeah, I can sort of sympathise with some of the immigrants, and it's like, you know.
You had to push him the whole fucking time, right?
Yeah. And then the other one was he said he was a classical conservative, and he said that he was a big critic of Trump and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, you've got some of the same. I mean, he was much easier to speak to just in virtue of like being
less trolly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I do get the impression that he said, I'm not a fan of Trump, and I don't like the Republican Party's gone. But you've still got, I think, some of the same themes of people. He was saying that people, were just fed up with immigration going too far, and that, the sort of the fact that illegal immigration is happening is making people feel upset and stuff. And like both of those things, like people can believe those things, but that doesn't make it
right.
Like
yeah.
Firstly, an accurate like summation of what's going on, and secondly, like it doesn't really. That can't be the answer. To look at all society and then think, well, yes, the problem is, I don't know, someone from Mexico came across throughout gaining legal status.
Right,
right. They're not congruent, are they?
No, not even. It's I don't know. It's weird the way they think, right? Because right off the bat, you have to be so stuck in the idea that like immigration, if it's illegal, is bad, right? You can't leave that space for some reason. and like I always think like you say with your first guy, like it's so so kind of a personal story from a friend of mine. He worked here for 2 years, and then he had an error on his paperwork, and his work visa was no longer valid. And then he tried very hard for a few months, spent a lot of money, and tried to get this his work visa going. And then finally he got a letter saying he had to go back to Colombia. And amazing person, just a great guy, should not have had to jump through these hoops. This should be an easy process. But based on what these guys believe, right? Like if it was your first guest and he went to another country and that exact same situation happened to him, it's fully okay for them to arrest him and put him into a prison.
Yeah.
Like,
just
what
shocking,
are you talking about?
It's really bad. And I think as well, it speaks to, I mean, the fact that the same people who, they insist on our government spending must be so tight and you must regulate what well, not regulate, so you must be really monitoring government waste and stuff. I'm happy for ICE to be given billions to
I know.
basically, throw into a black hole, right? Like, where's the money going we know it's going on building more prisons and stuff, right? But
yeah,
it's, no healthcare, but the ICE division gets like, a fancy new car and some
extra,
more money to
what was it, like 45 billion extra dollars or some shit?
It's shocking. It's like more than entire nations get.
What are you doing? Oh man!
And I think as well, like the people who will say, yeah, we cannot have illegal immigrants coming in. Like they're so fixated on the idea that the illegal immigrant is a criminal in the same way that like a murderer or a thief is a criminal, right? Like right. It's always framed in negative, pejorative terms as though like they say an illegal, like right. There's dehumanizing and horrible, and there's no thought to the idea that actually, as you've just said, right, the person whose visa has been annulled because they've changed some regulation or whatever, or the person who paperwork wasn't submitted in time, like they are illegals. And there's no, that is a member of society that you would never have even given a second thought to, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's sort of the underlying theme is that the premise, the logic that goes into, nationality and immigration is not really that, like, it's not that strong, is it? Right? Because it's ultimately all just arbitrary. It's all, this nation said, here is our border, and you're going to respect that. Otherwise, we have the power to treat you like a, like cattle almost, right?
Yeah, and like you say, like the default for the state is always to, which is weird. The default for the state is always to make it as hard as possible for people to come. But then we rely, like in Canada at least, like so much of our economy rides on the backs of exploited immigrant workers. Like, like you want to vilify these people, you want to denigrate them, treat them as though they're not human, and then but our whole system falls apart without them. Like you cannot have a thriving Canadian economy without immigration.
100%. It's exactly the same in the UK. I mean, it's ridiculous that anyone in the UK would claim immigration is some bad thing anyway, because like literally every single person who's, I mean, it's true anywhere, everywhere. America is another example. Without immigration, what on earth would even be there?
Right, yeah, and exactly. Nothing.
From conception, like our language is the result of people moving to the UK. We don't, like the fact that we've had 2 world wars and we both times needed immigrants to come and basically rebuild the country. But the EU, I mean, obviously we when we were in it, we had like millions of Europeans
coming and going, and then
we shot ourselves in the foot with Brexit because that meant many of them had to leave, and so the government realised like, oh, hold on a second, we're now short of thousands of labourers.
Right,
but literally we had fields of just food rotting because like we had all the people who worked there had to leave. Yeah. Which, I mean, for one, as we say, speaks to the blatant exploitation that is sort of built into economies. You need underpaid immigrants coming in to prop up the fortunes that British corporations, sort of reliance on. So then, obviously, when there's no more EU, we're out of the EU now, so we've lost all that labour. So now we need to look overseas, the Commonwealth nations. There's been an increase in like Southeast Asian, Indian, African. African is a bit of a silly thing to say because obviously it's quite a big place. Essentially, immigrants from places which weren't in the EU have increased and had to, because how are we going to, like the NHS is quite a big part of the country. We sort of need people to be in that. Like, and because of that increase, because it's there, the far right have used that as their wedge to sort of get in and say, oh, well, all the problems in the country that have been massively influenced by Brexit, because of course when you leave a major trade bloc, it's going to have some ramifications, especially in a austerity laden, deregulated mess like the UK was already and is even more. Like, of course there's going to be social issues, and the far right blame that on immigrants. They can point to more brown, because like the EU as well as obviously being immigrants, but a lot of them are white. So whilst you have obviously differences, that it's harder for the far right to as easily say, look how dangerous they are.
Yeah, they can't point the finger as easy.
Exactly, right. And so when you start introducing racial elements to it, when you start saying, well, look at these scary black and brown people coming into the country, that resonates more with people who are susceptible to those narratives. Because like if we go back to those towns, they're not as diverse, but you have obviously some people who are living there that aren't of white complexion, but they aren't the same diversity as like a city where you are surrounded by people of all sorts of nationalities and fairly, I mean, there was a big talking point that London's no longer white. Like it's still got more. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter.
Like demographically speaking, it's probably still the majority white. Like, what are you talking about?
Like, the country is still overwhelmingly white, but in certain places it's much more than in urban areas. So it's easier for far right people to come into those areas and say, yeah, look, we can blame your problems on the scary brown people.
But then they get mad because you point out that that's racist as fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like, I've never understood how it's not. I mean, we can talk about sort of the bad liberal response that is also part of the issue in this sort of scenario. But it's galling that when someone says London is not majority white or the country's less white, it's like, well, when you think about it, like
what difference does that make?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you're seriously going to argue that oh, there's more black people than white people. Like, you are literally the definition of a racist. Like, literally, it almost it's impossible not to be more racist than if you've said something like that.
That's right. Like, absolutely. So, what are you saying about the demographic change? What difference does that make to the way society runs?
Yeah, just blatant, obvious racism, and it's never like it's allowed specifically because I think the other sort of part of the problem is that there's not like, and it's a sort of wider theme in society, right? Liberals get pushed further and further right, as do the political system, but immigration is not only not a bad thing, it's also critical to the economies of every major Western nation. Like, without immigrants, there's no food industry falls apart. I mean, unskilled labor is such a horrible term, but that sort and they know why they get immigrants doing that, because they've got fewer protections and rights, and a lot of them they know don't have citizenship, so can't go to the authority in the event of workplace malpractice and stuff.
We recently ended a foreign workers program that was going on here that essentially allowed employers to underpay foreign workers and tie them into contracts that were tied to their visa. So then if they didn't work for them, then they couldn't stay in the country. And like, it was like this, like it was rightfully labeled as like immigrants coming here to be exploited, right? Like, it was just a terrible, terrible system. But the far right, or the right wing, of course, they frame it as stealing jobs from Canadian workers. So then liberals are defending this terrible program. And the left is going like, except you're like basically making these people slaves. Like, give me a fucking break. And so you have like this disconnect between the three kind of ways of looking at it.
Well, exactly. Right. And I think the term liberal is it could be a whole video in itself, right? Like, it's got such a broad application, because at one point, we would probably fit under the term liberal. Yeah. Like, obviously it is used as a pejorative by like conservative and right wing types, and it's also when you're sort of raised through the education system, you're sort of taught liberal versus conservative. Liberal is sort of the left and progress and stuff, and conservative is the other way of thinking. And so naturally, unless you sort of end up quite right wing, you think, I've got liberal views. I think everyone should be able to have the same rights and stuff. But when it's not, the difference I almost think is because they are attached to the sort of economic system of capitalism, because they're attached to existing social frameworks, and they're not critical of the structure of the economy and stuff. Right. They end up being pulled into far right discourses around immigration. Yeah. So you have liberals that they'll argue about immigration purely economically. So for as long as, immigrants obviously contribute to the economy and are obviously core part of labour, but they're also just human beings, and human beings should be able to live somewhere and seek the best life for themselves, right? Yeah, so that's right. What I find it very frustrating that a lot of the like you see, you're like, oh, if we didn't have immigrants, who would pick our fruit in the farms? And it's like, it's sure, but that's also not very. That can't be the sole reason, right?
That's both true and awful.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like, I couldn't believe one, and that's like, these are fairly otherwise like just ordinary people in society saying stuff that like sounds almost like, if we got rid of black people, who's going to be, right. Jobs? We don't want to. Like, it's awful when you. Yeah, exactly. And so you've got that sort of liberal. Then you've got the liberals who fixate on, illegal immigration has to be sorted out, and we're going to be the best party to do it. We're better than the conservatives on sorting out illegal immigration. Is something which essentially is like a free gift to the far right, because you're in a way basically just saying all your concerns and racist misgivings are valid, but leave it to the liberals to sort it out, which like they're never going to accept that. They're never going to, no one's going to be, if you believe that immigrants are some danger, why would you trust a party that a minute ago was all in favor of immigration because it helped the economy? Right. No one's going to be convinced by that.
That's right. Liberal parties keep doing that, right? Like, they keep thinking that they can go more right and convince right wingers to vote for them, and it doesn't work that way. All you're doing is alienating the left and anyone with actual progressive values.
No, exactly. And like, but what really like frustrates me too is that we have tons of evidence to see that this is not a winning strategy. Like, I mean, the Democrats twice have lost to Trump because, I mean, I know it's always tricky talking about that election because, I mean, with any electoral system, you've got the gerrymandering, you've got the fact that most people didn't vote, you've got so many things. But both Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, and even Joe Biden as well, and in fact every Democrat for years, you know, they've always had to try and pretend they can do the whole. I can be left and right. I can do the right wing stuff as well. Yeah. When they don't care. They're not interested in voting for someone. They have coded as liberal. They see liberal as weakness and they're messing with the country. We can do it better. Yeah. So the idea that you could promise to be better on deportations against people that would deport anyone that, you know, I mean, like Trump's doing now, right? Anyone who they have coded as foreign and, you know, illegal, i.e. non-white people in the country, basically, right?
Yeah. I just heard a very alarming set of numbers the other day. Like, there was like something like 14,000 deportations a month or something right now. And like, apparently under Obama, there was like 36,000 deportations a month. Like, so Obama was deporting more people than Trump is. And yet it's like this still somehow he got attacked by the right as being pro-immigration and as letting hordes come over.
Really 36,000 a month though. Like,
yeah,
I know Obama.
Well, that's the number that they said anyway. But yeah, like he was the highest number out of whatever the ones they listed. Under Biden, apparently it was like 13,000 or something, or 12,000. It was lower than Trump, but Obama's was enormous. I could not believe the number. I was like, what?
It's, I mean, the whole America post 9/11, basically, September 11th attacks, right? It has just slid off into right wing hell, basically. Like it's staggering that. I mean, obviously, Trump is horrendous, and that is sort of the theme. But yeah, how right wing America and how many rights they've lost as well, how much power they've given, their state apparatus to basically, police and incarcerate their citizens is
just the
shocking.
Increased militarization of their police state. Basically, it's like unbelievable. And
like immigrants basically take the full force of it, right? Because many of them don't have protections to fight against it. A lot of them, they can't even access like a lot of the stuff that we have to take for granted. Like they can't go to their their legal services because ICE are waiting for them there. They can't access welfare and benefits and stuff to help sort of maybe afford some of the stuff that might help them because you have to not a citizen, can't access any of it. Like, right. And it's sort of similar in the UK because we also we've also fallen down a right wing pit basically this whole century. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing that galls me as well. Like when the far right say, "Oh well, the left have led this country astray," and it's like they're talking about Tony Blair, and then it's the most right wing. Well, he was the most right wing Labour leader until Keir Starmer.
Yeah, until Keir Starmer. Jesus Christ!
But even Keir Starmer, like they are obsessed. That like the fact that Keir Starmer and Labour at the moment can't see that they're never going to win over the Farage supporting lot. Because like Keir Starmer is so right wing. Like they've doubled down on so many other things. The anti-trans stuff is horrific. Right. The fact they still, after all this time, won't commit to any tax increase. They're still adamant that their cuts are the way forward. And you've got Rachel Reeves talking about economic liberalisation and deregulating the financial sector, which had to be regulated because literally the 2008 economic crash was so horrific that they had to step in. And it shouldn't be lost to anyone that the state and public sector had to bail out all of them. Right. They had to literally use throughout this bailout. What happens to the private financial sector. Like, but no, it's the left's fault. But we have to be more right wing
Somehow. Yeah, it's I guess on some level I get it with the people who have power, right? Like they have to blame somebody and all they really care about is keeping power. But for like your average person on the street, like how do they maintain this disconnect with the fact that like the left is to blame when the real left has never actually had any power since however long, right?
Exactly. I mean, I was in a conversation so I can't remember who it was now. It was someone who said that I pointed out that because they were lamenting the failures of Democrats and Labour and stuff, saying, "Oh, the left's this," and I'm saying, think about it. Though, is this left wing? They very clearly advocate for free market, liberal implementation of capitalism. They clearly do not care for socialism or anything remotely similar. And they've gone more right wing since over the last 40 years of neoliberalism.
Yeah.
How is this left wing? And he was like, you've got a biased definition, but it's like, just think about what I'm saying. Regardless of whether or not I am left wing, surely you can see that a party that is very much basing their policy on what a free market does and assigning things based on market values and stuff. Like, of course they're right wing. Of course, just because you're to the left of like active fascism and stuff doesn't mean you're not.
That's right. Yeah, that doesn't make you left.
Like right wing.
Yeah, like I keep making the argument that like Mark Carney is a conservative. Like he's increasing military spending, he's doing budget cuts, he's placating big business, he's like negotiating with Trump on like a very like pro-Trump kind of way a lot of times.
Yeah.
And like it's just like what is he doing that the conservatives wouldn't have done? How are they different actually?
Exactly.
Like
a chocolate bar isn't as sugary as like a whole tub of ice cream, but you're still eating sugar. You're still
that's right.
Adding to your sugar intake for the day, right?
That's right.
And if you eat enough chocolate bars, eventually you get to the same sugar. Which
that's right.
Would be my analogy for it. But I think they're so, and the immigration thing is especially frustrating because on some level they must know that this is nonsense. They must know that there's no if they did what the far right want and just binned off all immigration, we'd be in a mess.
Yeah.
But they can't. They're so afraid of ever actually standing for something that might be deemed left wing that they have to our Secretary of State Yvette Cooper announcing that they're going to start releasing the ethnicity of the perpetrator of certain crimes and whether or not they're in the country permanently or like a foreign national. And it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
why would you give that the far right because I think in their mind, because a few weeks ago in Liverpool, they had their sort of football team that won the league this season, Premier League, and so obviously they had a parade from the city.
Okay.
And a man drove a car into a section of his parade, and a lot of people got injured, and it was really bad. And you had the inevitable, it's a Muslim terrorist. And so the police released a statement saying a white man, age whatever, has been arrested for civil disturbance.
And then the silence.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And I think that is what I can see Yvette Cooper and similar sort of thinking, we'll do things like this because they'll see, oh, actually, it's not immigrants doing it; it's also white people. So we'll stop. But they're not going to care. There's that when they did this, the silence was silence and them saying, well, you're fine calling him white, but then you've got to release all the black ones you haven't released and stuff. It's like they are so far into the far right pipeline that they're not going to care. Like they don't even if there was not another person of colour committing a single crime for the rest of the Labour government's tenure, they would still have it's not going to stop them, is it?
No.
So that should be evidence that you should stop. They can't appease them. But the other thing in liberalism as well, is that I think it is also susceptible to being dragged to the right because they've staked their because they go over market and because they believe in the marketplace of ideas and that they're just the best ones to manage capitalism.
Right.
They are dragged further and further into things which inevitably tend towards existing power structures of oppression and of the West versus the global South and stuff. So they, rather than critique the fact that corporations are wealthier than pharaohs, and you can basically you can buy a politician by backing them with millions and stuff. They're going to target the immigrant that is easier to critique than
because
the corporation that is also financing that.
Because they have no power. They can't stop them. They can't push back. They can't that's just it. It's I don't know. It's pretty messed up to think that like they're so far gone that way that where do you even go from there? How do you even get them to be like, because like you say, like if there was no crime done by a person of color or an immigrant for the next 3 years, they would still look at other countries and go, oh, but look at that one guy in America. Look at that one guy over in Canada. Oh, but in Germany, there was a guy who did the thing. And you go like, well, fuck, like we can't win then. Like, how do you like
exactly?
You need, wow. I guess I don't know what we need. I think we need an alternative propaganda, like something that can counter the fucking like the brainwashing that's happened to the people.
And I think a lot of that is like the things that we could do to like, even sort of pragmatically, even within the confines of our sort of capitalist system, right? Like they could regulate internet providers, but we've seen them attempt to regulate. I mean, I don't know if you've been following our Online Safety Act.
Oh no, a little bit. Yeah, no, I know I've seen lots of people complain about it. That's kind of all I've seen. It's absurd, eh?
On paper, it's like it's meant to protect young people from malicious and harmful content, but the person who defines what is malicious and harmful is obviously given a lot of power. And so what's lots and lots of sites have just been essentially met with a block. So Wikipedia was one of the sites that ended up needing some of this. Loads of online spaces.
Really?
Lots of LGBTQ people have said that they've basically been shut out because they've been the stuff they've done is deemed not good. Also, you're having to upload your personal ID or data to some online verification, which private corporations are doing that. So, if they decide, if they're bought by someone and that person that's bought them now has access to all your data, then
it's kind of
it's gone.
It's kind of a copy of the American law. There was just a Supreme Court case not that long ago where I was listening to the 5 to 4 podcast, and there was a Supreme Court case in America where they were fighting that ID law because they were saying, well, this is like an undue burden on my free speech rights, right? And I mean, the Supreme Court, as it is, upheld the law. And so a lot of stuff's being like really restricted in the US right now too. And that's the whole game, right? Like they want to paint anything LGBTQ as pornographic or anything like they don't even really care about porn. They care about targeting marginalized people. And then but they're using this framing of protecting children from adult content as the way to do it. And it becomes a thing where like, so now you as a person who advocates for real free speech for everyone seems like to them that you're like, no, I want my kids to be able to watch whatever porn they can find on the internet. Like, no, I do think there should be some safety, but no, I think we definitely have to be more careful about how we just broadly apply these fucking things.
Yeah. And like, as always, we have some of the answers. If you have strong sex education, if you have regulation of like social media and stuff, and online literacy, computer literacy, a lot of the issues would go away. If you address the misogyny and the anti-LGBTQ and the abuse that happens in online spaces and look at the sort of underlying social causes of that, you'd have more success than just slapping on some rubbishy ban or verification. But I mean, the fact that Labour have done this is, again, giving the far right more, I say Labour, the takeover, Keir Starmer's interpretation of Labour, the far right are saying, yeah, the left are censoring the internet. You've got to vote for us to get your freedoms back. And they obviously have the same bigotry, in fact worse, because you can guarantee the second they get into power, like similar bills are coming.
Well, it's it's not like the right is out there saying, "Oh, let's fund sex education."
No, exactly. We know what happens when they get in charge of that stuff. But because again, like liberal, like they've tolerated, they believe in the freedom of ideas to be discussed forever, basically, and they just believe that they will always win because they are the more logical and tolerant ones. And they don't realize that by just permitting all this conservative trash to be just like in their circles, they have been dragged to the right, because they, now the anti-trans stuff is quite indicative, right? There was none of it. Like in 2016 or 2017, the leader of the Conservatives, Theresa May, basically supported like gender, the right of a person to be able to, assign their own gender, right? To say, yes, my gender is this, and for that to be like on the birth certificate and stuff. The Conservatives said this. Now we've got Keir Starmer like basically trying to push through as much same sex spaces. But you need your birth certificate to get access and stuff. And you've got the other. Kemi Badenoch is horrific. Like genuinely, the leader. She is a bit of a joke because she's not particularly like. I don't think it's making the Conservatives sort of been overtaken a bit by Reform as like the main right-wing party, but obviously they're still they're an institution in the country, so she's still in the news a bit. But essentially, every like culture war, anti-woke talking point she just says all the time, and you can imagine a lot of that is anti-trans stuff. You've got her going on about it. You've got Farage and Reform saying, if we get in, we're going to kick transgenderism out of schools and just other sort of vapid nonsense like that. You've got, the national, like, for as much as American news is obviously corporate and really bad and stuff, like there is at least a sense of it being, I don't want to say original, but like that there's more, like, because it's such a big country, you've got quite a lot of like. It's obviously very corporate. It's like in Britain, like our newspapers are all sort of the same family owns like half of them, and writers, or even in the liberal spaces, all come from like Oxford and Cambridge University, all privately educated. Like some of them even got like lords and nobility and stuff in their family, and so essentially they all like write the same. I don't know, like you'd call it like sort of snobbish. Of civility and grace, and all that's not proper, and we can't have this activist type. Like it's all the same garbage basically. And so the result is the way the LGBTQ stuff is covered resembles something from like some 1900s, like you're being immodest, you can't be having that on our screens, and so when you combine anti-LGBTQ stuff with this like culture of sex negative, keep things private, don't bring it anywhere public. Like all the coverage of trans people from newspapers pretty much is like really outdated and bad. And even like the Guardian is supposed. It's not left wing. It's liberal. And it has. It's by far the best in terms of like of the mainstream papers in terms of like factually reporting stuff and. In having people on from like scientific backgrounds and stuff is much better. But they also have some really like, you'd call them turfs, wouldn't you? Like, sort of nasty, supposedly liberal, but vehemently anti-LGBTQ and anti-trans. And so they'll write these articles, and it's just like the articles they write could be something from like the far right, just like actively saying. Men impersonating women shouldn't be in our spaces. It's like, what on earth? This is in the Guardian, which is meant to be like,
that's like the New York Times for however long was always like the liberal paper, right? But then their columnists were all fascists and like anti-trans and like anti-LGBT, and you're like Barry Weiss is like basically a right-wing grifter now, and she came out of the columns of the New York Times, right?
And like, don't get me wrong, the Guardian, like it's still, I use it for a lot of my like, and also I have like different sources, but like it's they have good writers.
Pretty good.
They have trans people on there as well. It's not as though they're like an anti-LGBT paper,
right?
But because they're liberal and because they also get privately funded, they've got so there's going to be an element of we'll just pay anyone to come on. But they treat it as a debate and not an issue with an obvious if you're supporting people and platforming people who write stuff like get your sex at birth defines who you are, which in itself is a wrong set. Like what is sex? It's a social construct as well, right? It's an amalgamation of characteristics which someone's decided this is male, this is female. There's
that's right.
There's no science behind
I
that.
always think of the existence of intersex people, which is like more common than redheads. I just always gonna bring that up. Like they're a higher percentage of the population than redheads, intersex people are. So and that covers a pretty broad spectrum of people who don't fit neatly into man or woman or boy or girl, right? And so like just the idea, like you say, like sex itself is not like a straightforward. It's based largely on social construction and like just the ideas that we have about what these things mean in the same way that gender is, right? Sort of.
Like it's staggering that it's not just like, because you can imagine like you've got obviously the sort of just run-of-the-mill bigots who just you're a man or woman, you got nothing else. Like you get them all over the place.
Yeah.
But people of actual, like someone in the Guardian who you'd think might have better placing to actually, listen to like one trans person or even have a look at some of the modern sort of science and research that said actually humanity is a bit more complicated than just everyone's either M or F. Right. Like I know it's the same dogmatic, nasty vitriol, and the fact that I think it sort of speaks to one of the flaws of like liberal tolerance of ideas. They have swallowed so much anti-trans stuff that they're rejecting like modern, like when our Supreme Court said that biological sex defines what is a man and a woman, like that's been repudiated by numerous academic sources that have essentially said this is not in line with our research. And the UN, I think, is there's like an investigation I think going into the UK at the moment because of our recent what's it called, like a drawback of trans rights and stuff.
It's definitely anti-human rights. So
well, exactly, right? Trans rights are human rights. And so like you think if you're a liberal and you're like sort of reading this, you think, one of the world's like main organization, the UN, and major scientific organizations maybe have some ideas worth listening to more than flipping the far right and some pseudoscientists on Twitter.
Liberals like to believe the science when it suits them, but not when it doesn't.
And I think the other thing with it is what I said, because liberal, it is such a broad term. And when like even now when I'm saying it, I find myself thinking, I've got lots of friends and people I know that are liberal.
Yeah, of course.
Would not. Like the sort of the unpleasantness of it is that there's people who do not like what Labour are doing, who think like most people don't care about transgender people being some big threat. Most people just want to live their lives and don't care. But because our system sort of centers around the same voices and the same flawed and outright bigoted parties, there's nowhere for that discontent to go. It's like how people any such issue these days, right? People want justice in Palestine, but our parties refuse to, forget even, cutting off arms to Israel. They don't even want to recognize. They'll use Palestinian statehood as like a threat to someone in the future, right? And even then, healthcare is another one. People want healthcare as a human right, as like something they can just access. Like in America, they want to be able to afford like insulin and not have to pay for napkins and stuff. In the UK, we want an end to austerity and to the NHS to be fully funded. But we've got Wes Streeting, our healthcare secretary, basically inviting corporations in to handle the stress of the service. Well, no, if you just tax the rich,
That's right.
You wouldn't have that stress.
Enough with the cuts. Fund the goddamn system. Hire people for real. Give me a break. It's the same everywhere. It really is the same everywhere. I've been bitching about the Canadian healthcare system and not because it's bad to have universal healthcare, obviously, because I'm 100% anti-privatized healthcare, but because our government has grabbed onto that austerity nonsense that we can't spend too much, and there's people who abuse the system, so we got to make sure we're not wasting money, and why we can't just let old folks go to the doctor for no reason. We better start charging them $60 a visit. Give me a fucking break. And
it's so annoying, and that's so indicative of that sort of right-wing thinking too. Oh, someone's getting it for free, can't be having that.
That's right.
Even if 1,000 people came to a doctor over nonsense, that still wouldn't defy the point of having free healthcare.
Exactly.
Right? And it also ignores that, firstly, a lot of stuff is underdiagnosed. A lot of issues.
Yep.
People don't go to the doctor because they think, oh well, I'm fine. I'm they're almost encouraged to by our system, right, to be an individual and avoid help.
Yes.
And they end up dying because it turns out that little ache was actually a benign tumor or
that's right. I had a coworker who died from a heart attack because he hadn't been to the doctor in 10 years. And that's that, you're encouraged. You're told, don't go to the doctor. You don't need to unless you feel shitty. Unless you're actively sick. And even then, too fucking bad. Tough it out. You don't want to drain on the system.
It's that right wing individualism. Don't rely on others. You got to be your own person. That links, I think, so well to a lot of the the sort of chauvinism, the anti-immigration stuff, the idea that there's no society, you are the individual, and the state is just a hindrance and can't help you and stuff. Well, no, we've actively improved as a species our conditions by putting in place things that are government
by working together, right?
Exactly, right. I'm always we know that the welfare state is still it's a necessary bandage to capitalism, right? It's not. It's not we don't want the future to be defined by people needing benefits. We want there to be an end to the ingrained poverty and inequality that requires the benefits and welfare to be handed out and stuff.
Yeah.
But, the principle, as you just said, is still there. That idea of helping people and ensuring that everyone's needs are met and stuff. So
why even have a society if we're just going to let everybody fucking die on their own?
and intuitively, they know this too. They know. Can you imagine? The people who were oh yeah, well we are individuals and we don't want to have anyone. Can you imagine if they had to pay to drive somewhere because the roads are now all privately owned,
right?
Or if they try to go to the hospital and the nurse was like, well, I'll help you, but first, here's my credit card. You better pay me up, please. I've got
that's
they
America.
go to school. Yes, exactly, right? But a lot of them, all the talk of efficiency of healthcare is so insidious, I find, because they defund it and then try and claim that the reason it's not working properly is because of the government.
I was just reading yesterday about I didn't know this, but there's a company that owns the emergency rooms for a variety of hospitals across America, and they will charge you upwards of sometimes $4,000 just because you came in to the emergency room, even if you don't get treatment. This is America is the dystopia that we've been warned about.
It really is, and they inundate themselves with this fervent nationalism. You can't, you pledge allegiance to the flag, and even just you go on. I think I don't remember why I was looking at Google Images, but not Google Images, Google Maps. And you just look at the average American suburbs, and the American flag is everywhere.
Yeah,
they are so fervent. And then you look at what their country, and it's to mask the fact that their country is atrocious.
Yeah,
they don't have basic functioning human needs for anyone. Unless you've got a massive wallet.
That's right. And now like they're looking at forced institutionalization of people who are living on the streets. Like, so they either have to go to jail or a mental institution or drug rehab because they're homeless. And you, like, how, in what way is this country of not the worst country in the world to live? Like, because, yeah, it's just because some of them are so rich that it looks like on paper, like they aren't an awful place.
Yeah. Well, it's that right wing focus, isn't it? You could be the next Elon Musk
Yeah.
if you work hard, and it's like, well, no, even if you earn like £1,000 a day, like with no all up front, no to pay, how long is it going to take you to be a billionaire? Like lifetimes, and even then, you know, and the homeless incarceration is actually quite an interesting point because, as well as being just a horrible way to treat human beings, it also contributes to sort of the themes of capitalism. You know, the more people they can sort of incarcerate,
Yeah.
the more labor they've got concentrated in their prisons, the more people they've got under their direct control, the more money the prisons get, who obviously get lots of corporate stuff for having a bigger population. They can say, yeah, well, I need more funding. So that's another school defunded to fund the prison system. Like it's such a obviously corrupt nation, just in an inherent cause. And then like before you even consider the effects of America being like the world's most prominent sort of country in terms of like influence and stuff, and this to be the fact that we're even seeing them basically say everyone should be like us, everyone should have privatized healthcare and free market as like mantra. You know, they're not like those pesky Europeans. Like it's disgusting, actually.
Oh yeah, no, that's right. And I just released an interview with Tori Glass, and we were talking about some of this stuff too. And like she said, like because we have universalized healthcare, Americans who will point at us and go, "See, look, all those communists up in Canada," and you're just like, okay, but like, no, we're not communist, and you guys just have like a wild outlook on the world. Like, America is just the opposite of everything you actually would do if you ran your own country.
Well, I mean, I think the Americanization of stuff as well. Like we've got because like we I mean, it's part of the reason it's so it's so frustrating that like someone like Farage is really unpopular for all the stuff he's done, and the fact that he blatantly is like wants to be Trump's best friend.
Right.
He's been financed by tons of oil companies and American private organizations and stuff to basically take all talking points in American politics and put them in the UK. So like a few weeks ago he was like people are talking about this over the dinner table. Abortion's gone too far. From there, like we've got our share of like weird. Obviously we've got the sort of religious fundamentalists,
right?
And we've got plenty of misogynists and far right stuff. But it's not in the UK. It's not the same. Doctors don't have to go into hiding and stuff because they're going to get bombs and stuff. It's not like the same level of controversy as in America.
America is quite special in that way too.
Yeah, but like Farage, he brought it up blatantly because someone told him to, right? He'd never mentioned it before.
Yeah.
He probably doesn't care. He's been salty because that's where his funding comes from.
Right.
Another one is climate change. Like, I mean, we sort of discussed it there before, but like the fact that all the mainstream right-wing parties now oppose green energy and want more oil contracts and don't believe that net zero is a thing that should exist and think it's a hoax entirely. It's not because they've learned some new science. It's not because they've got some actual position. It's because they're funded by very wealthy capitalists who basically control large portions of the economy and recognize that if the left get their way, they're going to be having to cut back on their current practices.
Yeah.
So they've now turned to the right and said, if we're going to continue funding you, you're going to be basically climate deniers.
That's and it is. And yeah, and I mean, many of them happily joined on, right? Because somehow they've established this belief that even if, things go bad for the climate, then they'll be fine. You know, like somehow their money will protect them from the increase in extreme weather and heat waves and whatnot.
It's that capitalism as ideology. Like they believe that because they are a billionaire, they have the best intelligence and mindset to be able to overcome. And like the assumptuous logic that I am rich and successful and I'm scientific, and therefore I will solve climate change when it happens, and we'll be fine because we are rich and we can spend our way. It was like the idea that it is a problem, therefore humanity will solve it through billionaire innovators like Musk and Bezos and stuff. Like, you know, there's no. A few years ago, I watched the film "Don't Look Up," and I don't know if you've seen with Jennifer Lawrence and
quite good
and such. Like, it's quite an entertaining film. Obviously, it's you know, it's always interesting sort of seeing Hollywood films and stuff because they are, you know, liberal rather than sort of left wing.
You kind of it almost seems like a hyperbole a little bit. But I'm not so sure that they wouldn't just fucking try and mine on a comet that was heading at Earth. There might be magical minerals in there that we can make money off of after the Earth is destroyed. Absurd.
Like for all the, I mean, I always find like with those sorts of films, like obviously they aren't like you get from saying, oh, the comedies at Hollywood have made a film, and like, of course they're not. They're still
for sure,
liberal leaning and such, and they're still trying to make money off the film and stuff. But the film makes a fairly good point that people like the billionaire in that film, Mark Rylance, is that the actor's name? But his character basically, you know, sidelines what he could be doing, you know, i.e. supporting cooperative government efforts and stuff for their own, as he just said, like, oh, my innovations will make us millions and billions and help the world through us making a lot of money. Well, good luck, you know.
Good luck. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But like in that film, we're on the same planet as these billionaires, and we're sort of stuck dancing around to their tune.
It almost makes me wish there was a comet coming at the Earth and they would fly away. Like, it's absurd the way that, like, they're just, whether it's through denial or like just like ignorance or like like whatever the reason is, they are actually letting the planet burn and letting people die in the name of just maintaining their wealth, right? And it's disgusting. We joke about it in a dark way, but like it's fucking pretty awful shit.
Yeah, it is horrendous. And I've always thought as well that in this, I mean, in the same way that we've charged people for like human rights abuse and stuff, and for like if a company decides that they're gonna rip off people by selling them like bad stuff, we're meant to be processed and stuff. And obviously they try and dodge them too, but there should be more of an effort to actively, you know, have social consequences for the corporations doing this beyond just like not subsidizing oil. They should be going further. It should be, if you are found to have contributed to climate denial, then you should face legal ramifications. But unfortunately, that would implicate a lot of people within the political system. So like, it would be like almost like an upheaval. I think that is one of the not an issue as such because it's sort of inevitable, but like the fact that at this point change inevitably is going to be so radical makes it hard for many liberals to say, yeah, we've got to take a bigger step. Hence them feeling like a Keir Starmer type is the only sort of viable option to beat the Conservatives and hope that they will moderately reform the things back to a better place, and then inevitably getting let down because Starmer turns out to be as right wing as everyone else.
Well, and I think it's fair to say, like you said, like the only solutions now are radical. You can't fix what's broken this badly by just being like putting a Band-Aid on it, right? Like, it's, I don't know. It all needs to come down, and we all need to like overthrow these people. I don't know. It seems...
in my mind, I always try and be sort of pragmatic and sort of look at wins and irons. And I always try to like I imagine that in some way, I like to believe there is a nice, easy sort of pathway where someone gets into power and says, "Yeah, let's do some reforms," and the market, because like what annoys me as well with like climate change is that there is very easily a way for like green energy to be within the sort of capitalist framework. Like you could easily, a country like the UK with its coastline and
Right.
the amount of wind it gets, and the fact that we've got like a big long stretch of land. Like there's so much space we could be using for like wind power, coastal energy. We've got some more sunlight. We've got a lot of sunlight, so solar power. Like all of that could be used to properly, start replace the existing stuff. And British Energy could be like we could make loads of money from that if you wanted to stay within capitalism.
Yeah,
but we don't. We're still hamstrung on like oil and stuff. And I know, I know that like Labour have tried to do like more than the previous government. And to be fair, that's Ed Miliband, our climate secretary, is quite a bit more left wing than obviously still still liberal and
right,
stuff,
right.
Much more to the left of Starmer on many issues, but. Like it's not taken up. Like there's an easy win here, and it's like
it's weird. Yeah, it's weird. I guess I've used the word liberal in a negative way a lot in our chat today, but I do think like philosophically, I have a lot in common with a lot of liberals. I just I think that they're often worried about what would happen if the system changed too much. And even like myself, like when I was exploring anarcho-nihilism, like it's a pretty radical shift in thinking. And sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes we have to be willing to give up our privileges, our expensive lifestyles, the things that we have and the things we're able to do because we're built on exploitation and we're not acknowledging the consequences of it, and sometimes like maybe we need to like I don't know. I just think that liberals are like me in that they are stuck in their privilege in some ways, right? Like, and maybe need to adopt a slightly more radical perspective, I guess.
I think it's I agree with a lot of that. Like I think that there's also an element of the legacy of Red Scare. Cold War era sort of stuff that makes like a lot of people when you say communism to them or socialism or anarchism, they think of USSR, they think of Stalin and all the horrors going on in under his tenure. They think of starvation, and as you just said, they think in comparison of their lives in the West, where they've grown up with largely stable economies, human rights as law, and essentially no warfare taking place on our soil since World War II. I mean, obviously in Europe there was stuff that happened in former Yugoslav countries. Obviously the genocide in Bosnia and such. But on the whole, if you're from Britain, France, Canada, America, like you've not known living with war, and so as you've said, like they don't. And if they're not, they're aware of injustice and they know that there's things that should be improved, and they actually agree with a lot of left-wing positions of human rights and stuff, but they believe that the system in place now is the best one to getting it, and they're reticent to think about not only the fact that things need to be better for everyone, because I mean it's all well and good us saying we got a good life, but if you're living in the Congo and you're in a lithium mine getting materials that's going to be in an iPhone a few weeks time in America, like American, capitalism's not doing great for you, is it?
Right.
But also, there's like a lack of. Francis Fukuyama said, he said, the end of history is liberalism. Like we have solved all our problems, and where there's going to be some issues, liberal capitalism will basically fix and manage the world for the rest of the time.
Right.
And as we know, that that isn't the case, right?
Clearly, like that's not working.
It crashed before then, but like it crashed in 2008, where we're in just a cycle of capitalist growth and then crash, right?
Yep.
Combined with the climate crisis and the rise of the far right, it's not sustainable. And that reticence to try and think beyond the existing system is dragging everything further and further right and further away from the proper solution.
Yeah. Well, that's depressing. But we've been actually recording for real for like an hour and 15 minutes, so maybe we should call her a day.
Yeah, I think so. on that nice happy note.
Yeah, that's right. Let's try not to be too black-pilled, I guess. It's pretty things are, I mean, I struggle with it every day, right? I'm always seeing the worst, reading the worst stuff that's going on, and you go like, fuck, is there any fucking hope for the future? And I mean, I guess that's part of why I've actually like found some of anarcho-nihilist philosophy kind of like really like appealing, because they're very like, you know what? There is no hope. So fuck it. Let's blow some shit up. And I'm not that guy, but I can appreciate that sentiment, right?
There's sentiments there that can be sort of shared. Yeah, I do have hope still. I think that for as long as there's people who can recognise that things are not okay, there's a chance that we can improve things. And yeah, things are absolutely not okay now, but they also weren't okay in 2001,
yes,
in 1945, in any year basically of our human history, right?
Yeah.
Because we've had problems like this for a very long time. But in the same way that slavery was overturned and World War II, the Nazis were beaten in World War II, like these are things that might have also been seen as, you know, the world's coming to an end.
Yep.
I do think that we can get there. It's in my mind, it's how much we lose before we get there. In some ways, like it can definitely be stopped. We can definitely make progress, but
yeah, I
it's
guess
a case of what we have to endure on the journey there, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I guess on some level that's kind of where my real black-pilledness comes from, is because I just don't see it changing before a lot of people suffer even more, right? And that, I mean, as a person who gives a shit, that's I don't, you know, I find that really kind of dark, I guess, but
yeah, no, it is dark. It's dark times, but I think in some ways, like it's even in my mind, I say to myself, even if nothing changes in my lifetime and everything is awful and oppressive and as dark as that would be, I will have lived and I will have said I was not okay with this, and all the, even just like these little conversations now, it like someone in 1,000 years' time might discover this and think, yeah, okay, they knew it was wrong, so I will know it's wrong as well.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
Like, the seed of like dissent and knowing that things don't have to be as awful as what they are now. It's
like when like Sir John A. MacDonald, the Prime Minister of Canada during when Canada was confederated into an independent state, was a massive racist. He was a terrible human being, and we can now look back on the things that people wrote about him and see that he was a massive racist and a terrible human being, and that they knew it. There were people who knew that was awful. and it's, I guess, hopefully, maybe someday people can look back on this and go like, people knew that this was fucked up, and it didn't have to be that way. All right. Go ahead.
Just my last thing I was going to say was I always like to think that like even a video with like one view, some alien librarian is just going through all of it. They've got everything far away. So I'm going to come to this video and say, Corey and Owen, they knew what was up.
That's right. We're famous on another planet somewhere.
Exactly.
All right. I guess. So where can people find your stuff?
Owen MacDonald on YouTube, on Blue Sky, on Twitter, but
never really there
now, so less likely on there. But yeah, those places mainly.
All right, sounds good, and thanks for joining me.